As a quilter with eclectic tastes, my hobby experiences have ranged from early efforts at cross stitch through scrapbooking and paper crafts until I finally landed on quilting. And even with quilting, there are a variety of techniques to explore. With my love of history, I found that exploring quilting and the textile world all around the globe has been fascinating. I learned so much in my chat with Elizabeth about a variety of techniques that she learned from traveling the world. Let's take a listen. So I'll just dive right in. I always like to hear how people got started quilting. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's kind of hard to say how I started. I always was somehow drawn to quilting, which is unusual because I didn't really know any quilters. When I was growing up, I knew people that made things and did embroidery and sewing and stuff. But I was always just really interested in it. And so I would go to the library and get out any books that they had. And I just taught myself through books that I found. And also, I think I'm kind of in the wrong generation because people older than me quilt and people younger than me quilt. But I mean, I was in high school in the late 80s and early 90s, and there was nobody, it wasn't a real popular thing at that time. So.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely of the same generation, and it seems like we're sandwiched, like you said, between the popular demographics for quilters. But I was looking at your website, and you have a very interesting intersection of these fabric arts. So tell us a little bit about the techniques that you are known for.
Okay, so I do regular quilting as what most people would define as quilting. 11 years ago, my family actually traveled and we lived in Korea for a couple of years. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to learn Pojagi, which is a Korean sewing technique. And one of the techniques that I learned, one of the seam techniques, is actually a reversible seam. It's like in dressmaking, it's like a flat fell seam, but they use that for patchwork, which I had never seen. So I learned that it was all hand stitching with silk fabric and things. And then when I came back to Canada, the fabric was hard to get. And also I wanted to do bigger projects and I didn't have the time or energy to do that by hand. I wasn't really motivated. And so I developed a technique to do that on sewing machine. And so it's reversible. So I call it Modern Pojagi because it uses Western fabrics and uses sewing machine instead of being done by hand. But when it's done in a window, it just really looks like stained glass. And especially with batik fabrics, it just has a glow that looks like stained glass. So that's probably the thing that I'm most known for.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
A lot of people, when they see it for the first time, they want to see the back because they're curious of what the raw edges are, but there are no raw edges.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I'll have to investigate your website and learn more about that technique. Ooh, yeah, that's stunning.
Yeah.
I really like that. Yeah, wow. Quilting controversies. Where are you with the pre-wash question?
Usually I don't pre-wash. I'm kind of too lazy. So unless I have something, like if I had something with red and white, then I probably would, because I have been burned in the past with colors running, but generally I don't.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always too anxious to get to the sewing step to be bothered with the pre-wash, because that always means you have more ironing.
Yes, yeah.
And then binding. Do you bind by hand or machine?
I usually bind by machine. So unless it's going to be like if it was for in a show, which I haven't actually done in competitive quilting, or if it was for a magazine, then I would hand. hand bind it.
Okay. And do you do machine quilting yourself, or do you have a quilter for hire that you can send projects off to?
I do it myself. I can't really afford to send it out to somebody. So
And if you've been quilting for a while, then I'm sure you've had some practice and feel comfortable with that.
yes, yeah. So sometimes I do free motion. I do a lot of walking foot
Hmm.
quilting to just keep it simple and easy.
Yeah, that lets the fabric do the work.
Yes, yeah.
Great. Do you incorporate embroidery on your quilting projects, or are those kind of two separate areas?
I do incorporate embroidery. Um, Sometimes I like to have just anytime where you have big empty pieces, like in a snowball block or something like that, it's nice to have embroidery in there. So it depends on what the project is,
Okay.
but especially on table runners, I like to have embroidery on something like that or on a wall hanging that will be displayed.
Tell us about your quilting bucket list. What are some techniques that are out there that you still want to try?
I have a really big quilting bucket list because I want to try everything. So that, but I was thinking about that. I thought I would really like to sometime do a Baltimore album
Mm.
quilt. Uh, I have fabric that I have sitting waiting to do a One Block Wonder quilt. I would like to learn Longarm, which there's a local shop here that rents out the Longarm. And I took the class and to like learn the basics, and I really liked it, but I just haven't gone back to get better at it. I'd like to do picture quilts, like quilts that look like art, like a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a quilter called Geeky Bobbin, and she teaches a class, and the class is called Fussy Cut Like a Rocket Surgeon. And it's just the fussy cutting and the piecing is so amazing to see. Sometime I'd like to take that class.
Yeah, there's always more out there that's interesting
Yes.
than we have time for. So I totally
Yeah.
understand the length of the list. Do you have any quilting fears or dislikes?
I don't know if I have any fears really to say, because I mean, the worst thing that can happen is it's a total disaster, and it is only fabric. I mean, I love fabric, but it's only fabric. Nobody's life is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I don't like is basting.
We are still, unfortunately, restricted in our travel, but you said you had lived in Korea. How else have you been able to travel to quilt, and how do you manage that?
I haven't traveled a whole lot for quilting, just because I still have 4 kids at home. I did go a couple of years ago to Canada's biggest quilting convention, which is called Quilt Canada. So I was able to go there for a couple days. That was great. So that's something I have on my bucket list also, is places that I'd like to go. And so,
yeah, hopefully things will open up soon and we can get together. Talk about big projects versus small projects, because you do have that balance, that diverse interest with your big quilting tops and then your smaller hand embroidery projects.
yes. And depending, if something is hand stitched, then a small project can take just as much time as a big project that's done by machine. But when you had the question, what's the biggest quilting project you've attempted? It forced me to dig this out because it's still a UFO. It's the biggest project. And now that I'm forced to look at it, I'm thinking, okay, I need to just get this done, because this has been in the works for over 10 years. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when we were traveling, we were actually traveling home from Korea, and we stopped at a few places on the way. And we stopped in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and there was a fabric shop there that had all reproduction prints. And so I picked up the kit for this. And so I thought it would be a great idea that I should hand piece the whole thing. So it's about 75 inches square. So the top is all hand pieced. So these pieces are 2.5 inches square. And I've started hand quilting. So the whole beginning of it is hand quilted. It's just the border has to be done. I mean, I haven't touched it for a year. But now somebody said, oh, should you finish by machine? I said, with the amount of work that's put into it, I can't just quilt the border by machine. I have to do it by hand. But so this is my biggest project.
Okay, very nice.
I can't even estimate how much time has been put into that already.
At that point, it's an epic.
Yeah, and I don't know what, like I'll probably hang it on the wall. Like I don't want anybody to touch it when it's finished.
For sure, put it behind glass. And
yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. But, what about small projects when you are talking about your smallest?
So my smallest project I have is actually something that is great for teaching. And it's this little coaster. Okay. And so this is made with Pojagi seams. If you can see, it's hand stitched.
Okay.
And these aren't reversible seams. So this is just lined. It doesn't have a backing. But the one thing that's unique with Pojagi seams, the traditional ones, is that the stitching is visible. It's done with the contrasting color. So it's part of the design. So it's an overcast stitch.
Oh, yeah. That's
so this is a nice size project. If you're just want to try something new or you're thinking, I don't know if I'll like it, but because a coaster, even if you really don't like it, you can get it done and feel like you've accomplished something and then say, okay, I tried it. No, I don't have to do it again. Or I tried it and I'll go on to something bigger. Right. Yeah, so that's a good wonderful project to try something without a huge commitment.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I always think of placemats as a good idea, but a coaster is even better.
Yes.
What is your shopping strategy when you go into a quilt store?
Usually the first place I would go would be to look at notions and tools and see what new things they have. And then I will look around at fabric, but I don't tend to buy fabric unless I have a project for it. I'm really trying not to have a huge stash and to build up a collection. Some of the pictures I see of women that have like whole rooms full of fabric, that it seems stressful to me. I love looking at the pictures, but it seems stressful to me to think to have that much that I would never use. So I'm trying not to do that for myself. If something's on sale, then I might get it.
So I'm thinking I can guess the answer to this, but it's something that I struggle with defining my own process. Do you start with a pattern or do you start with fabric as at the start of a new project? What gets you going first?
Usually I start with a pattern, almost always a pattern, either a pattern from somebody else, or I'll just start with a piece of graph paper and pencil crayons and sketch something out and then go from there. So I'll almost always pattern first and then look for fabric to fit that.
Yeah. Do you use any design software or are you a paper pencil type of designer?
I am a paper pencil person. I do sometimes use a software called Pre-Quilt, and it's actually a member. Have you seen that? It's a membership for an online thing, and that's really fun because you can do your layout and then change the colors. So that's fun. Or you can just click a button and it'll do random colors. So you can just do random 20 different colors, and you might find a combination that you haven't thought of. And it also has a neat thing. So you could do whatever design, but then it will mirror it into like 4 quadrants. And then so you can rotate and things. So there's some fun designs with that. So that's fun to play with too.
What is the favorite quilt you've ever made?
So it's kind of funny. It's really simple. and it was a kit. And it was a kit that I purchased on Craftsy years ago.
Right.
And I first saw it and I loved it. I thought, no, I don't need to get it. And then after seeing it for about a year, and finally it's like, okay, I'm just going to get it. So I made it, and it is hanging on my wall, but I have a picture for you. I'll show you a picture. It's called Rolling Meadows. And it's just a kit with charm squares and a backing fabric.
Ooh. Yeah. I love the gradient, and when you use kind of that ombre effect.
Yeah. So it's just the color layout. So it's not really difficult, and it's not really fancy. It's just the colors and the layout, which was all done for me. So yeah, and I love looking at the quilt all the time.
You mentioned that you try not to keep too much of a stash, so kudos to you for that. I'm definitely guilty of having too much. So how do you manage projects? Do you have a lot of UFOs, and are they?
So I have some UFOs that are just in bins, but about, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, I actually went through and I was ruthless. It's like, if I'm not going to get it done, just get rid of it. And just to narrow down my UFOs to what I really wanted to finish or what I really liked. And so that actually, it was pretty freeing. It was like a burn. So, I mean, I have maybe 10 UFOs. So it's not like I have zero, but the things that I have, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to really like it, but it's just the time, like anything.
Were you able to find people in your guild, or what did you do with the projects that you decided, oh, I'm never going to finish this, doesn't interest me anymore?
Some things I was able to find somebody else who was interested in it. And some, if it was just fabric that was cut and kind of set aside waiting to be pieced, then that might have gone back like into my stash, just not as a UFO.
I think that is one of the kind of haunting things about UFOs is that, well, I don't like it, but I've spent time starting the creative process, and it's very hard to let go of that and like put it in the trash.
Yeah, it was difficult at the time, but then once I did for a couple of them, it's like, I'm never going to do it. I started it years ago, and it's kind of cheap fabric. It's not even that great. So then it's like, okay, just let it go and think of it as a learning experience. Like when your kids are learning how to draw and how to write, you don't have to keep every single piece of paper that they write on, like every piece of schoolwork that they do. So just, yeah, I think people should give themselves permission to practice and learn without thinking that this has to be a work of art.
Yes.
Like you can have practice things that I'm just going to practice, and then that's it. Like,
yeah. And I was thinking about this with learning free motion quilting, because I think that plays into it too. People think that they have to create a finished object, and you can always layer another piece of fabric and stitch again. So I've thought of that with some of my less than successful attempts, that they can be backings, they can just be another layer for a project. So good. And as we wrap up, what is your best advice for beginner quilters?
Yeah, I think that's my best advice there, is just give yourself permission to learn. And anytime you start something new, then you're not going to be an expert at it. So give yourself a chance to learn. Don't compare yourself to somebody else who's been doing that for 20 years. Just have fun and play with it, because it's not brain surgery. Nobody's going to die if you cut the fabric wrong, or if the colors don't work out the way you thought. You can always try again. So just enjoy the process of it.
True. And
don't be so stressed if it doesn't work out perfectly. You can always try again.
Yes, this is supposed to be a fun hobby. So Good. Well, it was lovely to chat with you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, thanks so much. This was fun.
I hope you enjoyed this chat with Elizabeth and are excited to try Pojagi along with me. I have the perfect window to display a new patchwork technique. Stay tuned as we meet more quilting friends. I'll be back next week with a new interview. Until then, check out these videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.